Pro Football Focus released their top 25 preseason poll yesterday, and Texas comes in at number 5 on the list. And I'll tell you why they absolutely got it right.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/Locked On today to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, we are discussing the preseason poll from Pro Football Focus, their top 25, which Texas, your favorite football team, comes in at number 5 on, and I'll tell you why they got it right. Then we're talking about one of the biggest official visit weekends in recent memory, which resulted in 2 commitments from Jared Gibson and Nate Kibble, and a whole lot more crystal balls headed to the University of Texas. And last but not least, Ronnie Terry is hot on the recruiting trail as well, bringing in 4-star point guard Chris Johnson from the 2023 class, originally from Missouri City, Texas, spent his senior season at Montverde in Florida. We discuss all of that and more on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So in the first segment, we're talking about Pro Football Focus, their top 25 preseason poll that they released yesterday. Texas comes in at number 5, and I'll tell you why I think that they got it right. And I didn't even really pay attention to 6 through 25 on the list. I just know that they got the top 5 right, with Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, and then your favorite football team, the Texas Longhorns. And we know with Pro Football Focus, which is funny because they're one of the biggest content producers in the industry, you kind of have to take everything they say with a grain of salt. And they put out a lot of content that's, made us kind of look at it with the side eye. But like I said, at least their top 5 in their preseason top 25 was correct to me. When you look at the top 4 ahead of Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Ohio State, there's no question in my mind that these are the top 4 programs in college football right now, right? When you look at the last 3 to 4 years, all 4 of these programs have either won a national championship, competed for a national championship, or have been one game away from the national championship. And when you look at it, this is the hindsight is 2020 college football playoff from last season, because Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State all made it. Alabama did not. The committee felt like TCU had a more impressive resume. They went 12-0 in the Big 12, did lose the Big 12 championship game to Kansas State, but they were in it until the end, and they beat Michigan, right? Which wasn't factored in the committee's decision, but that's part of their resume ultimately after the season. But we saw when they played Georgia why they did not belong on the same field as Georgia, and why it would have been a better decision to put Alabama in the college football playoff, because you should never have a team lose by almost 60 points in the national championship game. That was just ridiculous. And I guarantee you, if you put Bryce Young and that Alabama team in the Natty against Stetson Bennett in Georgia, we would have gotten a dogfight instead of that ass whooping that we saw between Georgia and TCU. So, you can definitely make the argument that TCU deserved to be in the college football playoff. There's no argument to be made that TCU was one of the 4 best teams in the country, which is why you got the national championship game that you did last year. So like I said, I think these are the top 4 programs in college football right now. Pro Football Focus absolutely got it right, putting them as the top 4. So now you're looking at it and you're saying which team in that next tier can jump into that upper echelon of college football with Georgia, Alabama, Michigan, and Ohio State. And it seems that Pro Football Focus, as well as a lot of other people in the media, believe that Texas is the next team that is primed to jump up in that upper echelon of college football programs, right? And most people believe that starts in the 2023 season, where Texas is projected to win the Big 12 and possibly make the college football playoff in the 3rd year of the Steve Sarkisian era. And there's 2 ways to look at it, right? You can look at it as, a critic or a Texas hater and say, what has Texas done to deserve being a top 5 team heading into the season in any preseason poll? And the answer to that is nothing, really, right? But it doesn't matter because it's a projection. It's a prediction, right? It's not an official ranking, right? And so you can look at it that way, but the better way to look at it is Texas capable of having one of the 5 best seasons in college football this year? And I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. The reason for that is the talent on this roster, which I'll get to, the continuity on the coaching staff, and the schedule that Texas has in front of them this year. So let's talk about the talent on the roster. And we've talked about it ad nauseum, pretty much talk about it on every episode of Locked On Longhorns, where we do a football segment that's not about recruiting. But we've never attacked it in this angle in terms of blue chip ratio. And that's what I want to do today. So blue chip players are 4 stars and 5 stars. Blue chip ratio is the amount of 4 stars and 5-star players on your roster. And I'm about to put up a graphic from 24/7 Sports, I believe, which shows the highest blue chip ratios in the sport over the last 4 years. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it. If you're listening on audio, I'll do my best to visualize it. So these are all of the programs over the last 4 years that have brought in more 5-star and 4-star recruits than 3-star or lower recruits in the country. This does not factor in transfers. This only factors in players that have signed to the school out of high school in their recruiting classes, right? And when you look at this, these are the 16 programs that have done it over the last 4 years. And Texas comes in at number 7 on the list, behind Alabama at 90%, which is insane over a 4-year span. Ohio State, you can make the argument they've underachieved with an 85% blue chip rate over the last 4 years, even though they've had a lot of success and played for a national championship. Georgia, 77% with 2 national championships. A&M with 73%. They have underachieved absolutely with that blue chip rate, 72%. From Clemson, they have not done well the last 4 years up to that level, but they do have 2 national championships to show for it. At least LSU, 71%. They did win a national championship in 2019 and won the SEC West last year. Texas at 70%, and then Oklahoma tied with Texas at 70%. We know they had some really good teams in the Lincoln Riley era, which is a big factor into that, right? Going over the last 4 years, where Brent Venables has only been the coach for 1 season. So when you look at blue chip ratio, Texas has over the last 4 years brought in the 7th or tied for 7th with Oklahoma most talent in the country to their program. And we can say that stars don't matter, but stars only don't matter when we're talking about individual success, right? Because when you look at a player like Jalen Ford, he was a 3-star coming out of high school. He ended up being an All-American. You would have not projected that based on him being a 3-star out of high school. So stars don't matter in terms of predicting individual success, but stars absolutely matter in terms of predicting team success. The fact of the matter is, in college football, the most talented teams are the ones that are winning the national championship every year. And you've seen teams like Cincinnati and TCU who have kind of broken that mold and have been able to get to the college football playoff and national championship game with not having high blue chip ratios and not having, the requisite talent level that an Alabama, a Georgia, or a Ohio State may have. And we saw what happened in those games, right? When Cincinnati got to the college football playoff, they did not look like they belonged on the same field. TCU absolutely did not belong on the same field as Georgia. And you could see neither Cincinnati or TCU are on this list. It checks out, right? To win at the highest level in college football, you need the highest ratio of 4-star and 5-star players on your roster. That's always been true, and it's going to continue to be true moving forward. Now, this doesn't factor in, culture. This doesn't factor in if you got that dog in you, anything like that, right? So I guess anything can happen. But statistics show the best teams in college football are the ones that consistently bring in 4 or 5 stars on their roster. Texas has done that, even being in a down period over the last 4 years. And you have to credit, obviously, Tom Herman and Steve Sarkisian for that, because Steve Sarkisian has not been at Texas the last 4 years. When you look at it, 68 out of 96 of the players they have brought in via recruiting classes since 2020 are 4 or 5 stars. It's actually 71%. I don't know why they put us at 70. That was kind of messy, but I did the math. It rounds up to 71%, but whatever. This does not count transfers or, players leaving the program. This does not mean that the current roster has a 70% blue chip rate. It just means that via recruiting classes, Texas has brought in 70% 4-star and 5-star players in their recruiting classes over the last 4 years. And I think that this metric, which shows that Texas is one of the most talented teams in the country, which we already know, does not even do the 2023 roster justice, because I'm going to tell you a lot of players that are going to have an impact for this Texas football team this year that are not factored into the 70% that you see on your screen, right? Jalen Ford, an All-American, was a 3-star player out of high school, right? So he's playing like a 5-star in college football, but he is not factored into that 70% blue chip rate. Barron Terrell, a 3-star out of high school, 5.5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss last year. He's going to be better this season, not factored into that blue chip rate. Savion Red, a 3-star out of high school. definitely going to be utilized on the field. Somebody you can't keep off the field, a very talented player, not factored into that 70% blue chip rate. These are all of the transfers who I expect to have a huge role on the team, and I probably left some off. But Ryan Watts, Quinn Ewers, Isaiah Nayor, A.D. Mitchell, and Jalen Catalon all will be big factors for this Texas football team this season, not factored into that 70% blue chip rate that you see on the screen. So this Texas football team is even more talented than their blue chip roster. I mean, their blue chip ratio would show. Now you could say the, same about every other team on the list, I guess. I don't really care. This is Locked On Longhorns. This is Locked On Aggies. This isn't Locked On Clemson. It's not Locked On whatever. It's Locked On Longhorns. We're talking about Texas here. When you look at Steve Sarkisian specifically, the blue chip ratio, the last two cycles, the cycles that he has been the head honcho or the main reason for 2022 and 2023, that number jumps from 70% to 75%. So Texas in the two Steve Sarkisian cycles, 2022 and 2023, has a 75% blue chip rate, which would jump them all the way up to fourth on this list, ahead of A&M, behind Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama, who have all played for national championships in the last 3 years. Now, somebody would say, well, you can say the same thing about Texas A&M and Clemson at LSU. Once again, this is Locked On Longhorns. That's not my job, right? And when you look at the blue chip ratio of starters, it's 72%, but that does not do it justice, right? So projected starters going into this season, Texas has 16 out of 22 blue chip players, right? But when you look at 4 of the 6 players that were not 4-star or 5-star players coming out of high school, you have Jalen Ford, Barron Sorrell, Tavondre Sweat, and Christian Jones. To me, all of them have shown at the college football level in the Big 12 in a Power 5 conference that their recruiting ranking was wrong. They should have been 4 stars or 5 stars. They have played at this level like a 4-star or a 5-star. So if you look at it as 20 of 22 starters were either blue chip players or have played like blue chip players at the highest level in college football, it's 91%. Coming into this season, you can make the argument that Texas has a 91% blue chip ratio amongst their 22 starters on offense and defense. That is one of, and if not the biggest reasons why Texas absolutely could have one of the 5 best seasons in college football this year. Then when you look at the continuity on the coaching staff, we have a ton of it, right? And I think that means a lot. When you look at Georgia, they're replacing their offensive coordinator. You don't know what that's going to look like. When you look at Alabama, who we play in week 2, they're replacing their offensive and defensive coordinators. We don't know what that's going to look like, right? Continuity matters. Over the last 3 years on this coaching staff, you have only had to replace your wide receiver coach and your running back coach. And when you look at it with your running back coach, Tashard Choice has hit it out the park, right? So that was a home run hire. You definitely did really good in that regard. And when you look at wide receiver coach, you've had 3 different wide receiver coaches in 3 years, and it remains to be seen what Chris Jackson will do. But I don't think that has a huge impact on continuity or this coaching staff when all you've had to replace over the last 3 years is your wide receiver coach and your running back coach. And like I said, you hit it out the park with Tashard Choice. I have a lot of faith in Chris Jackson, but that remains to be seen, of course. So that continuity should bode well for Texas coming into the season. And the last argument is they have a very favorable schedule in terms of the talent on this roster, the continuity of this coaching staff, and the expectations for Texas with all of the talent on this roster. When you looked at that blue chip ratio, and I'll put it back up on here, right? The only teams on this list that Texas will play this year are Alabama and Oklahoma, right? So Texas very well should be one of the best teams in college football this year. And I'm going to take that next step like Pro Football Focus says, and they'll be one of the 5 best teams in college football this season. You're favored over every team you play this year but Alabama. And I think they have a really good chance to beat Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa, even though Alabama should be favored. Texas has a chance to win every game on their schedule. There's no doubt about that. You only leave the state of Texas twice to go to Alabama and to Iowa State. That is a very favorable schedule, especially in your last year in the Big 12, right? I know a lot of us thought that they were going to give us some crazy schedule, have us in Iowa State one week and then have us all over the country the next week, right? That was not the case. Only leave the state of Texas twice. That bodes really well for your favorite football team. And last but not least, you have 7 true home games, right? If you play 12 games in the regular season, 7 of them are in DKR. That bodes really well for the best team in the conference. It should propel Texas and Steve Sarkisian to a Big 12 championship this year. So the question isn't and shouldn't be, why is Texas the number 5 team coming into the country? Because like I said, that's an opinion. It's a projection. It's a prediction. It really doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. It just gives me something to talk about on the show. The real question should be, is Texas capable of having one of the 5 best seasons in college football this year as a football program? And my answer, along with Pro Football Focuses and a lot of smart people in the media, is absolutely yes. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to talk about why Texas absolutely hit it out the park on their official visit weekend, resulting in 2 commitments and a lot more possible commitments down the road, hopefully for our sake at the 40 acres. Baseball season is in full swing, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to join today. So don't miss your chance to snag a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so we're talking about the official visit weekend over the weekend at the University of Texas at the 40 acres. And like I said, everybody hit it out the park, from the recruiting staff to the Texas football staff to the players. Everybody involved did an absolutely amazing job. We heard so many good reviews from the families and the players, even national media, right? The recruits, about just how well Texas did on their official visits this weekend. And we saw 2 commitments, which we'll talk about in a minute, but a lot more crystal balls for 2 of the most talented players in the country, and 5-star Colin Simmons and 5-star Kobe Black. So I would say that Texas did a really good job. Also a lot, crystal balls for, 4-star corners, safeties, receivers. It's just Texas did a really good job, right? And to illustrate that, I want to read this quote from Joe Owens. Joe Owens is the father of our quarterback commit in this class, Trey Owens. And this is what he tweeted immediately leaving the University of Texas on his official visit this weekend. Once again, this is Joe Owens, the father of Trey Owens, our quarterback commit from the 2024 class. Headed home from our Texas football official visit weekend and could not be happier with the town, the school, the coaches, and the support staff that we will entrust Trey Owens with over the next few years. Anyone who has asked, I have told, the top-notch attention to detail, the chemistry between the staff, their families, and the players is easy to see. There's a reason for the buzz around Texas athletics. Half the sports teams were in the national championship games this year, and 5 brought home the hardware. Chris Del Conte has done an excellent job as well. I know everyone can't wear the burnt orange and white, and I feel sorry for them. This is a special place. Hook 'em, right? I think that is a hell of an endorsement from one of the family members of one of our commits. And it just goes to show that this Texas football program is changing, right? This looks a lot different than it looked 3-4 years ago. And it's the reason that I believe that Texas will be one of the top 5 programs in the sport this year. And that will continue as long as Steve Sarkisian and the staff is at the 40 acres. So, I mentioned a lot of crystal balls. We'll, have to see what happens with that. Of course, a crystal ball does not mean a commitment, and a commitment does not mean a signing. So, this is going to be a long game in terms of recruitment, especially with Colin Simmons. We were hoping that some of the big dogs, would commit this weekend outside of, Jared Gibson and Nate Kibble. But, they have other visits. They have to weigh things out. And, Texas will just have to continue to recruit them through the whistle. But in terms of the players they did bring in, we talked about Jared Gibson last week as one of the top running backs in the country. I think he's number 2 in the country in the 24/7 Sports Composite, number 39 overall player in the country, and somebody I have compared to Josh Jacobs. I also saw my boys from Texas Football Talk. I can't wait until they start putting out YouTube content again. But we were talking in the chat, and they gave him he said it's not an original thought. I don't know where they got it from, but he came up with a really good comp of Sony Michel as well. Somebody who was really good in college football and, won a Super Bowl, in the National Football League. So I think that when you look at Jared Gibson, he's just a powerful running back, right? Somebody who's very productive, one-cut, decisive runner that gets downhill, and he's physical. He doesn't shy away from contact, has a really good stiff arm, right? Does a really good job of, bouncing off of tacklers. And, yards after contact is something you're going to see a lot from Jared Gibson. He's just hard to bring down. You have to be very intent about tackling him, and he just has insane contact balance, right? You'll see plays on tape where he gets damn near speared and doesn't go to the ground. he gets almost tackled and can put his hand on the ground, regain his balance, and keep running again, right? He doesn't have the juke moves. You know what I'm saying? He's not going to shake anybody out of their shoes. He doesn't have the top end 4.2, 4.3 speed, but he's just a very productive running back that is built for the SEC, right? He's going to run behind a very talented offensive line, and he's going to make a lot of people miss in terms of running them over, stiff arms, or just not being able to tackle them, and he's going to wear you down over the course of a game, right? We saw that kind of with Roschon Johnson. He reminds me of that mode where he's going right through, right? And you might want to tackle him in the first quarter. You might want to tackle him in the second quarter. I bet you don't want to tackle him in the fourth quarter. I love this move from Jared Gibson. And we have to talk about how Kyle Flood, Steve Sarkisian, and Tashard Choice have established themselves as probably the best recruiters at their position in the country. I mean, when you look at Tashard Choice, we're talking about Jared Gibson. He gets the number 2 running back in this class this year, the running back he was targeting out of Florida. The second year in a row, he's gone to Florida and gotten the best running back in the state. Cedric Baxter last year also got his number 1 target in Arizona in Christian Clark. Plus, we saw the development of Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, and Jahmyr Gibbs, who all went to the NFL draft in the first 4 rounds, right? So Tashard Choice has established himself as one of the best developers and recruiters in the country. You look at Kyle Flood, who brought in Nate Kibble, right, who I'll talk about here in a minute. He's brought in 13 offensive linemen in the last 3 recruiting cycles thus far. That's insane, right? And like Nate Kibble said, if you're serious about your development as an offensive lineman, you got to go see Kyle Flood at the University of Texas, and that's why he's committed. Somebody who visited Texas A&M 5 times and only visited the University of Texas twice. And then when you look at Steve Sarkisian and what he's been able to do, the last, I guess, 3 recruiting cycles, or 4, I guess, 2022, whatever. Steve Sarkisian, since he's been at the University of Texas, has brought in Quinn Ewers, Malik Murphy, Arch Manning, Trey Owens, and KJ Lacey, going from the 2022 class to the 2025 class, right? So they're all undoubtedly one of the 3 best recruiters at their position in college football. That's why Texas is poised for success. Love this Jared Gibson get for Tashard Choice. He got his 2 top running back targets in Jared Gibson and Christian Clark, and I think they're both going to dominate in the SEC behind a really talented offensive line. And Nate Kibble, 6'2", 315, committed over the weekend. A lot of people had him as a Texas A&M lean, but like he said, if you're serious about your development as an offensive lineman, you got to go see Kyle Flood in Austin. He did. He committed. Great pickup from Kyle Flood, who's doing it better at the offensive line position than anybody else in the country. What I love about Kibble, he fits the big human threshold that, Kyle Flood has brought to the University of Texas. Great size, 6'2", 315, brings a lot of versatility, played left tackle and right tackle in high school, recruited as a guard, somebody that's going to step in as an interior offensive lineman and should be really good for this Texas football team. He comes from great lineage. When you look at Atascocita High School, I don't think I said that right, but that's the best I'm going to say it. Look at what they've been able to produce just over the last 4 years, right? Kenyon Green, first-round pick in 2022 out of Texas A&M. Sam Cosmi from your favorite football team, second-round pick in 2021. Cam Dewberry, the 81st overall player in the 2022 class, currently at Texas A&M, and now Nate Kibble. So a high school program that's putting that many offensive linemen in the league and in Power 5 programs in college football gives me all the faith in the world that Nate Kibble has gotten great development in high school. He's going to continue that great development at the University of Texas. And he's going to be a really good player for us on that interior offensive line. So I thought that they hit it out the park this weekend. Like I said, once again, I want to give credit to all of the people in our recruiting staff. They do such a good job. You saw all of the pictures from the official visit weekends, how they decorated the hotel rooms, all of the events and different things they have planned for them. They work all year on that, and they hit it out the park. Our football players that are currently on the roster do such a good job of helping our program in the future. And we have just some superstars on this coaching staff that do an amazing job of making these recruits and their families feel like they're a part of the Texas family and making them feel like the University of Texas is home, even if they're not from the state of Texas. They hit it out the park this weekend, got 2 commitments, and I think you'll see the fruits of their labor continue to benefit the University of Texas over the next few months as the commitments start rolling in more and more frequently. A quick word from our sponsors, and then we're talking about Ronnie Terry and the wizardry he's showing on the recruiting trail as well. All right, so Ronnie Terry has done a really good job of filling out the roster, and I believe now he has his 9-man rotation going into the season. It remains to be seen what else they'll look for in the transfer portal, but I think now you currently have 11 players on the roster, and I think I'm pretty comfortable. I think most Texas fans are pretty comfortable with the 11-man roster and the 9-man rotation we see thus far. And Texas I guess, executed what seemed to be a college basketball trade, right? We know obviously you can't trade players in college basketball. That's something that's reserved for professional sports, but it felt like a trade took place between Kansas and Texas, between Bill Self and Ronnie Terry, because we remember Arterio Morris, who we thought, 5-star player out of Kimball, who was really good for us last year, and we saw a lot of development over the course of the season. We thought that he would step in and be a starter for us this year, right? We looked at it and said, okay, Tyrese Hunter's probably coming back, which he did. Arterio Morris is probably coming back. That's a really good starting backcourt, right? But, there were some rumors about, Arterio Morris and Ronnie Terry not having the best relationship. And Arterio Morris decides to go to Kansas. And I think he's going to be really good at Kansas under Bill Self. I wish him the best of luck. Hope to see him playing in the NBA one day. All right. Well, Chris Johnson, who from Missouri City, out of Elkins High School, goes to Montverde for his senior season, spent the first 3 years at Elkins. He signs to Kansas, right? But then he gets released from his NLI, requests to be released, and he ends up at the University of Texas. And he said that it was always his dream to play at the University of Texas. People say, well, why didn't you commit to the University of Texas out of high school? It doesn't matter. Whatever. He's at the University of Texas now. And what I love about this move is he has been mentored by TJ Ford, the most iconic player in our program. Of course, Kevin Durant is the best player to ever put on, the Texas jersey. But I think in terms of Texas fans, TJ Ford is our number one guy in terms of Texas basketball. And he's been mentoring Chris Johnson all his life. So, if TJ Ford is willing to put his name behind this player, obviously Ronnie Terry and the staff are willing to put their name behind this player and think he can really help us out. I'm bullish on Chris Johnson at the 40 acres. I also think that because he'll be coming off the bench this year, I'm not worried about him going to the NBA draft next year or trying to go to another program via the transfer portal. I think this is somebody that can have a really good season for you this year off the bench, and then next year can be one of your 2 starters at that guard position, potentially next to Kendall Weaver, who probably will spend another year at the 40 acres as well. He has really good height at 6'4" as a point guard, not a big point guard like we're seeing now, 6'6", 6'7", but definitely 6'4" is really good height for a point guard. Very explosive in getting to the rim. I think that's his best trait, and that's something that Ronnie Terry wanted to prioritize in the offseason, getting players that can put a lot of pressure on the rim, because that does so much for all the rest of the players on the court, and that opens up your 3-point shooters if you have the requisite spacing on the court, which Texas will. He's a willing passer as a point guard, does a really good job of getting his teammates involved, especially when he breaks down the defense and gets to the cup. He does a really good job of finding, the open man for easy shots. And he started at Elkins in high school in Missouri City, Texas, and then came off the bench for Montverde, right? When you go to Montverde, that's one of the most storied and most talented programs in the country. We saw Dylan Mitchell come from there last year, Cade Cunningham, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? These are where the best players in the country go to play high school basketball. And to me, it shows a lot of character. And I would just say that it shows a lot of character that somebody who was a superstar, the number 1 ranked prospect in the city of Houston, who could have stayed his senior season at Elkins and dominated again, said, no, I want to go get developed at Montverde. I don't care if I'm coming off the bench. I want to play for one of the best programs in high school basketball in the country. That tells me a lot for somebody who was a superstar at Elkins to come off the bench his senior season at Montverde. It shows he was serious about development and getting to the next level in college basketball, and hopefully one day in the NBA. And this is a requirement for a Rodney Terry coach team, but he competes on the defensive end. And he had a quote saying he loves playing defense, right? And I think he's going to fit right in as a tall guard, 6'4", that can get to the rim and can more than hold his own in terms of a defensive matchup, right? He is not a great shooter. You'll see on his highlight tape, he does make some threes, but that's probably the most inconsistent part of his game, just being able to shoot. But I think that'll, of course, develop over time. And he's somebody that right now can step in and be really explosive for this Texas basketball team. And when you look at the makeup of the roster now, just specifically going over the 9-man rotation at the guard position, you have Max Amos, Kendall Weaver, Tyrese Hunter, and Chris Johnson. I think you're set there. You can bring in more players, but like I said, I just don't know how you can fit in a 10-man or 11-man rotation in college basketball, right? We had a 9-man rotation last year. I think we're going to have a 9-man rotation this year. Your wings, you have Tariq Onyema, Brock Cunningham, and Dylan Mitchell. Now, the thing that concerns me about this, and we'll have to see how much Dylan Mitchell develops, how much confidence he'll have in his offensive game going into this season, because we know he can do a lot more than he showed last year. Part of that's on him, part of that's on the coaching staff, right? But last year you had a wing in Timmy Allen that could create his own shot and could cut to the basket and get easy shots and could make plays for everybody else. I'm not sure how much Tariq Onyema, Brock Cunningham, and Dylan Mitchell can do that, right? These are probably the players that are going to be on the court that teams are going to decide to leave open. Now, Brock Cunningham did shoot 40% from three last year. I think he's going to have to prove to defenses that he can do that again, but I'm just not sure how much shot creation or spacing Tariq Onyema and Dylan Mitchell give you at this point. So I do have concerns from the wing position, how explosive we are from that position on offense. But I think on defense, you have three of the scrappiest, best defensive players in the country, right? And then in terms of your bigs, Caden Shedrick and Dylan Dessou, who are going to be really good. So I think this team has improved a lot in terms of three-point shooting. This team has improved a lot in terms of players that can get to the rim. This team has improved a lot in terms of their defensive potential. I think they'll be a top 10 defense in the country this season. My only question is, are you talented enough and versatile enough on the offensive side of the ball at the wing position to compete with the top teams in the country in college basketball? But nonetheless, I'm looking at a roster. I'm looking at a 9-man rotation who I think should get to the Sweet 16 again for the second year in a row. And you're looking at a program under Rodney Terry who is taking the next steps to being one of the top programs in the sport. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hook 'em. Hey.